So hello and welcome to our Italy webinar this evening, showcasing Venice, Florence, and Rome. I'm Gurvinder Ravery with Gurvi Travel, your expert travel advisor. And tonight, I'm fortunate to share this event with two colleagues from Kensington Tours. I have Stephanie Governelli and Hope Marshall. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you so much. It's so good to be here.
It's great to have you. So we're excited to hear from both of you tonight, as we will in just a few. But before we get started, if you're not muted, please mute yourself so that we can completely immerse ourselves in Italy for the next half hour. During this webinar, you are welcome to post questions in the chat, as we will have time at the end for Q&A. So I hope everybody's ready for an authentic trip through Italy's iconic cities. So pour yourself a glass of wine and let's get started. I wanted to start off by introducing our speakers today. You've seen a little bit of them, but Hope Marshall is our destination expert. She has worked remotely in Italy herself, and she's passionate about making all your Italian dreams come true. So please join me in welcoming Hope. And I would also like to introduce our other speaker today, which is Stephanie Governelli. She's the Director of Sales with Kensington Tours. Stephanie has over 20 years in the travel industry, and her experience spans. She is based out of New Jersey and lives there with her family. She is passionate about seeing travelers experience bucket list adventures. So please join me in welcoming Stephanie. So go ahead and take it away, Stephanie.
Thank you so much, Gurvinder, and we appreciate you partnering with Kensington tonight to, like we said before, start to talk about travel again. Just start to dream and plan a little bit. I'm actually not the star of the show. Hope will be tonight, so I'm just going to speak briefly about Kensington. If you're not familiar with us, Kensington Tours is an award-winning luxury tour operator, and we offer one-of-a-kind private guided luxury experiences to over 140 countries across 6 continents. So we're concentrating on Italy tonight, and I know Gurvinder will talk about some other destinations in the months and weeks to come, but we do want to let you know that we have a lot more destinations out there that Gurvi Travel can help you plan, and we'll be there behind the scenes to help out with that. So if we could go ahead and start the next slide. So while we're bringing that up, I can go ahead and talk about our 4 pillars to success. And I think the 4 things that kind of help Kensington to stand out and stand apart. And the reasons why you really want to work with an advisor like Gurvinder, who's working with a partner in the background that can support really great planning, great execution of a trip. Like I said, many of these are bucket list items. So the first would be that we specialize in private guided touring. That's all we do. So all of our itineraries are customized to meet the needs and really cross off any wish list that you're looking to accomplish. You travel according to your schedule. We don't have any set departure dates that we require. You're never traveling with any crowds or bus tours, small or large. You're traveling on your own when you want and how you want. So that's definitely a benefit to being able to really experience a destination in a very special way. The second pillar is, there we go, our expert planning. So I won't belabor this point because we actually have one of our expert planners with us tonight. Hope is going to present on the destination. And you should know that when we're working in the background to plan these experiences and these unique personalized journeys, we are working with our destination experts who are specialists in the region. So Hope doesn't sell every single country that Kensington sells. She specializes in a destination, so she could give that firsthand knowledge and experience. She travels back to the destination regularly, so she can vet the experiences and the accommodations that we're offering. And then to take it a step further, when you're in destination, we employ the very best guides in the region. So we have exacting standards, we vet all of our guides, and we train them in Kensington standards according to a luxury North American expectation. So whether you're traveling with us to the Caribbean or to Italy, you're going to maybe experience different cultures, but the level of service and the consistency in the product will be the same for you. And that's really important to us, that we're delivering that exacting standard. The other thing about our guides is they're not just guides, they're historians, they're archaeologists, they're culinary experts. So depending on the tour that you're going on and what you're looking to experience when you're in destination, those guides are going to add a level of depth and access to whatever it is you're experiencing that you won't find on a group tour, small or large, and you won't find if you're traveling on a self-guided tour. They're going to bring an additional factor to that experience for you. And then of course our 24/7 support. If something comes up at 2 in the morning and you have a question, we're there for that. But also any changes, we're always a step ahead. Our destination experts are constantly checking in with our guides, our tours, to make sure that everything is going seamlessly, even down to when you arrive at the airport. Once you clear customs, our representative takes care of the rest. So those are really 4 important points. They're going to make all the difference in your experience when you're traveling to these wonderful destinations that Hope's about to present. And we want you to keep that in mind when you're planning for future trips. So Hope, I'm going to turn things over to you.
Great, thank you. Welcome. I'm very, very excited to talk to you about Italy. I am no Stanley Tucci, I know, but I will do my best. I won't be making any cocktails or a Negroni right now, but I will be talking about traveling to this destination. So I have included all of my personal pictures from all of my travels within Italy. So Govinder did introduce us. And so I did work remotely in Italy in the summer of 2019, not knowing what the future held. So very glad that it was 2019 and not planned for 2020. I was there for approximately 3 months, and I was there with my colleagues. So we worked and traveled all at the same time. It was quite exhausting, but wouldn't trade it for the world. And so we spent 2 weeks in Sicily, 3 weeks in Puglia, and then 4 weeks in Florence. And then we used Florence as a base to explore Tuscany, Cinque Terre. And we also went to Spain for a weekend, no big deal. And then I did a Kensington trip after that, and I did the Piemonte region, Milan, and the Amalfi Coast. And then prior to that, I have traveled with Kensington to Lake District, so Lake Como, Lake Maggiore, and Venice, and then also my personal travels outside of that. So I'm as well versed as I can be at home now in 2021. But this picture here is a picture in Tuscany that I took on one of my day trips from Florence. And so you are seeing Italy through the eyes of myself from the past. So I just wanted to share that while we're all sitting at home on Zoom. I also specialize in other regions. It's a bit of a mixed bag, but those are the areas that I specialize in because I'm passionate about those and because I've traveled to those before. I've also lived in Australia for a couple of years, but you know, we don't need my whole life story here. Let's get into the Italy. So this picture is from the top of Giotto's Tower looking onto the Duomo in Florence. So I also climbed the Duomo. So I didn't go actually in the church because of this particular era of churches, the inside of the church isn't as spectacular as the outside, and it's free entry. And so there's a lineup around the block, and I'm just not about that. So we bought tickets to go to the top of the Duomo. So you can actually see people up at the very top if you look very, very closely. I was there. Also on the inside as well. And then Giotto's Tower is on the other side, and it's a lot of stairs. And then you can go out onto this lookout and then see the Duomo from there. So there are lots of ways to see Florence and to see Italy. And so that is something that we definitely wanted to do. So what I'll talk about today is how to get there. The itinerary, we're going to talk about Rome, Florence, and Venice, and I'll discuss a few tours and hotels that I think are not only must-sees, but somewhere that you can take your family to. And then some tips and tricks, just some things to have in your back pocket when you're thinking about planning a trip to Italy. And then we can do the question and answer period. If you have any questions now, feel free to put them in the chat, but I will answer them at the end just so I don't get distracted. Happens quite often. Okay, so how to get there. There are direct flights to Rome from JFK, Newark, and Atlanta on both Delta and United. Most of the time, my clients are flying either Delta or United. And then they arrive in Rome more often than not between around 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. So you're there and you have a full day. I personally don't plan a lot of tours on the first day, in case your flight is delayed, just in case you're not accustomed or acclimatized to the time change yet and you don't really want to hit the ground running. Some people choose to do that. I don't personally recommend it. I would rather get my bearings and have a light day and then get right into it on day 2. To get between the cities of Rome, Florence, and Venice, my personal preference and recommendation are the high-speed trains between the cities. So between Rome and Florence, it's only about an hour and a half. Florence and Venice is 2 hours, and then Venice back to Rome is about 5.5 hours. And I mentioned this one because sometimes internal flights from, let's say, Venice to Rome don't always make sense. You might think that they make sense, but by the time you get to the airport, get on the plane, and then you get there, it sometimes makes more economic sense to take the train. So keep that in mind. Also, depending on the size of your family, what your travel preferences are, you can also take a private transfer in between these major cities. And I often put in stops along the way, not only to stretch your legs, maybe get a snack, but to also see some other places that you wouldn't necessarily see on the train or you wouldn't necessarily see at all because it's just not really on your radar. So some of the places I suggest in between the drive from Rome to Florence would be Orvieto, Siena, or San Gimignano. There's also many other places within Tuscany if you wanted to hit a particular winery or just a particular village in general, we can absolutely make that happen. And then when you're going from Florence to Venice, some of the stops that I've done for other clients would be Bologna, Parma, which is a little bit north of Bologna, and then Verona. Verona is a very lovely town that has a lot to offer. And then it has Romeo and Juliet story, which a lot of the kids like as well. So I will come back to this picture because it is important to Venice. So I won't detail it right now, but if I don't remember, remind me because it is an interesting story. Okay, so Rome, this is my family at the Colosseum a few years ago, actually. Looking like a bunch of tourists, but we're having a great time. So for tours of Rome, you could spend a week in Rome and still not see anything, but the absolute highlights obviously are going to be the Colosseum, the Vatican, a historical walking tour. We can do food walking tours, cooking classes of any sort, and then a cycling tour, which goes out into the catacombs, and then you cycle back along the Appian Way. And so for 8 years or older, it is a very interesting way to see the city and see outside of the city that you wouldn't normally see. So I wrote a note here. Yes, so they're cycling paths, so you're not going to be on the road with all of the cars, and you go as a group to the catacombs that are over 2,000 years old, and then you cycle back along the Appian Way, and then you get picked up by a transfer back to your hotel. So you don't have to worry about trying to navigate those crazy Rome roads. And then for the cooking class, and the food walking tour, they are in the neighborhood of Trastevere. I always stumble over that word. I studied Italian before I left, and let's just say I am still studying. And so this neighborhood of Rome is north of the Tiber River, and it's a neighborhood that's really, really well known. It's up and coming, and there's lots of restaurants and trattorias for a food walking tour. And it's also known as the Jewish neighborhood. So if that is of interest, we can always make a tour that's focused on the Jewish history part. For the historical walking tour, we include things like the Trevi Fountain, Piazza Navona, and the Spanish Steps. But if there is something in particular that you or your family is interested, we let our guides know ahead of time, and then they can tailor it in destination. And also, once you get in destination, you think, it's day 7 of your itinerary and you're thinking, oh my goodness, if I see another church, I'm just going to want to close my eyes and not see anything ever again. You can absolutely talk to your guide at the beginning of the tour and say, you know what, I don't think I'm really feeling that right now. Could we pivot a little bit? And that's the beauty of having a private guide, is that they're able to pivot and accommodate what you might be feeling in that day, of course, within reason. But it honestly is the best way to travel. I've traveled in a variety of different ways. And now that I've traveled with Kensington, I don't know that I will go back to any other way. For the Vatican, obviously, it is a must-see, regardless of whether you're religious or not. There's the Vatican museums, the Sistine Chapel, but as a note, there are some things to note, like there aren't a lot of seats in there, so you're walking around for about 4 hours. So we have in the past made exceptions for people with mobility issues. If there are, larger groups, we have, I think it was over 10 people. We have what they call whispers, so that you can hear the guide and you're not getting a lot of the background noise, so you're not digesting the information that has been told to you. And then for the Colosseum, we have what we call the exclusive underground level. So that's the level under that you have to get an extra ticket for. And that's sort of where the gladiators were before they came out onto the stage. So they only have a certain amount per month, and they're only released 3 months prior, but we can book that for you. And that's an additional tour onto our just regular Colosseum tour. So there are lots of different options depending on what your group and what your children or anyone that is in your travel party is interested in, and then to keep the attention of the little ones or the tweens or the teenagers, we have a lot of different options there. Some notable hotels that I wanted to discuss for families in Europe in general, but in Italy specifically, it's very difficult to find hotels that look like the hotels we would find here in North America. So, the Hiltons, the Marriotts, where you have 2 double beds in a room, those don't particularly exist in Italy. And if they do, they are the Hiltons and the Marriotts. And sometimes those hotels don't always have the best locations. So yes, we could find them, but then they might not be essentially located. So a few of the hotels that I wanted to mention have specific family rooms and or connecting rooms, so that you can get quad rooms, triple rooms, things like that. So the De Molini is one that I use for families quite a lot. They have, I think, a room up to like 7 people, but I have had families of 4 there in one room before, and it is on the Vatican side of the Tiber River, so it's a little bit quieter. And you're not really in the hustle and bustle. However, you can walk across the bridge maybe 10 or 15 minutes and you're in the area of Piazza Navona and that kind of thing. Hotel 47, I've also had some families stay in, and then in at the Spanish Steps. So This hotel is very unique. I stayed there actually in 2019, and you are practically sleeping on the Spanish Steps. The location is unparalleled. The building is actually 2 or 3 buildings, which are old converted houses. So there are a few stairs involved, but they have sort of these apartment style rooms. So they're good for families as well. And the Spanish Steps are literally right there. So really, really great location. If we're looking for more luxurious hotels, the Roccaforte de Russi is one of the top ones that I choose. It is often on Condé Nast Traveler list best of. There's also the Palazzo Manfredi, which is located near the Colosseum. So again, not in the hustle and bustle, but some of their rooms have a view of the Colosseum, and they have a rooftop terrace that has a view of the Colosseum. So you can't be beat there. And then the Aleph. So the Aleph Rome is actually a Hilton hotel, and it has a good location, which is a unicorn in Italy. And it is relatively new. I believe it was renovated in 2018. And I've had a lot of good feedback from that hotel as well for clients that I have sent there. And so moving on, we'll go to Florence. This is a very tired Hope at the Accademia Gallery with the statue of David, which is one of the must-sees in Florence. You really don't quite understand how large and how intricate the sculpture is until you're seeing it in person. It's really quite amazing. So the Accademia Gallery, we would pair that with a walking tour. It's usually around 3 hours. Accademia Gallery and the Uffizi are timed entries, so we purchase those tickets beforehand, and then your guide would arrange the tour accordingly, so they make the path so that you end up at the Accademia or the Uffizi at the end or at the beginning, depending on the time. And then they take you through there as well as the walking tour. We can also do a cooking class with a market visit, which is another thing that I did there. So you get to go to the market, pick all of the ingredients that you're going to use for the cooking class, and then you go back to the kitchen and then you're making all of the dishes. And then the best part is you get to eat it, and there's a glass of wine as well, if you would like. There are lots of different options we have in Florence for that. We can do it on a shared basis. We can do it on a private basis. And then we also have an option where you can go to a chef's actual house and then experience it that way. So there's lots of different options there. Leaning Tower of Pisa, always very popular with the kids. And that is a day trip out of Florence. So Florence, Tuscany is the province that Florence is in, or the state that Florence is in, but Pisa is to the west, and then Siena and San Gimignano is to the south. They're roughly about an hour away from Florence, but in opposite directions. So we have Pisa as a half-day tour, or we could pair it with Lucca and do a full-day tour. And then you get to go see the Leaning Tower. And then we can also do other day tours to Siena, San Gimignano, Montepulciano, lots of different Tuscan villages. And then we can also do cooking classes in those Tuscan villages. And of course, wine tasting. You couldn't go to Tuscany without visiting a vineyard. So those are all sorts of options that we have. Again, notable hotels, because as I mentioned, sometimes it can be difficult to find these options for families. So there's the L'Orologio, which is translated to clock. So the hotel has a bit of a clock theme, and they have triple rooms and quadruple rooms as well. Santa Maria Novella is a great one. And then also Grand Hotel Minerva is one that has a fantastic location, lots of different room configurations, and they also have a rooftop pool. I mean, I'm sold. I'd like to go right now. For luxury, we have the Brunelleschi, which has a great location. It's a 4.5-star hotel. We have a really great relationship with them. They are very, very great to our clients, and When I was there in 2019, their restaurant was on the verge of getting one Michelin star. I believe they have it now, but I'm not sure if the pandemic has derailed those plans, but they were en route to having a Michelin star restaurant. And then also Villa Cora. So Villa Cora is on the outskirts of town. And it's an old villa that has been converted into a hotel. And it has this rooftop terrace that overlooks the city. So it's really nice to have an aperitivo drink and look out onto the cityscape. And they have a duplex room that you could do triple or quad in as well. And so when I say quad rooms, that doesn't mean that there's lots of rooms that have these capabilities. Usually there's only a couple on hand, so they do book up quite in advance. But Villa Cora, even though that it's on the outskirts of town, they still have a shuttle that goes into town for clients. So you don't have to worry about being too isolated there. Next, we'll go to Venice. And so this is me on a water taxi with one of my colleagues that I did my Kensington trip with in 2018. And so I believe this was when we were doing our Murano and Burano tour. So some of the options we have here for tours are the classic walking tour, we have a hidden walking tour, and there's also a Jewish history walking tour. So if there's an interest, we probably can do it. And then in terms of a Bakari tour, I really like this tour because you're getting a taste of Venice as a local. So a Bakari is the plural of Baccaro, which means bar. So you are going essentially on, I want to say a bar crawl, but it's not a bar crawl that North Americans would necessarily call it. Basically, what the Venetians do is they have an aperitivo, so they'll have a glass of wine, and then they'll have cicchetti, which is a Venetian style of Spanish tapas. And so on this tour, you go to maybe 2 or 3 different Baccaros, hence the Bakari Tour, and your guide will let you live like a local. I particularly like that because food and wine is the way to my heart. So I absolutely love that kind of tour. And then it's a little bit different depending on, the age of your children or the age of everyone in your group. That could be a nice, not a typical way to see the city. Same with the cakes, coffees, and ice cream tour. So this tour is you're visiting some of the most celebrated cake in Venice, coffee, and then ice cream shops. Well, your guide tells you about the food traditions of Venice and a little bit of the history of Venice itself and the food traditions that go along with it. Murano and Burano tour. So this was one of my most treasured memories from Venice, and this is where I will remember to go back to the slide. And so Murano is the glass blowing island and Burano is the Venetian lace making island. And so these are off of the main island of Venice Island. So you take a water taxi there. And so I will go back to this slide. Whoops. And so not only did we get a glass blowing demonstration, I actually got to do glass blowing myself. And so again, this is pre-COVID where I'm actually touching something with my mouth, where now I would definitely think twice or 3 times about doing that. But this was really great. I actually got to do it myself. There was no one else in the showroom there, and we got a hands-on experience. They were actually making for one of the other hotels. They were making, I think, about 80 of these glasses. And so they kept making the same thing over and over again. And I said, well, what are they making? And our guide let us know that they were making a special order for one of the top hotels in the city for a dinner party casually. And then my colleague that I was traveling with also got to do this as well. So I did not make any sort of glass, just a very ill-shaped bubble. But the fact that I got to do that, where I wouldn't have gotten to have that experience if I had traveled in any other way. There was also the showroom where they had loads of different kinds of glasses, whether that be sculptures, plates, anything you could name it, they had it there. And we had the opportunity to look around and purchase if we wanted to, but if we didn't want to, we didn't have to. It was very much said that there wasn't a lot of pressure to purchase. It's not, we're not trying to scam you into purchasing, thousands of euros on glassware. Anyways, back to this. So Burano, then we went to the island of Burano, which is a very colorful island. All of the houses are very different, vibrant colors, and it's such a cute island. And we watched these ladies, I believe there's only a handful of them left, that can do this Venetian style of lace making. And it's so intricate. And they have this little pillow and it's all needle, like pinned in. And they can only do it for about 4 hours a day because it hurts their eyes. And these are basically known as grannies who are still keeping this tradition alive. And so we went into some shops and got to see how that was made. So that was a really great day. And I highly recommend doing that, especially with a private guide, so that you can really understand the authentic experience. A visit to Venice is not complete without a gondola ride. We can do that in the day or evening. And so something to point out, we pre-book that for you. And then we have an English speaking assistant who will take you to the gondola stand, sorry. There are so many to choose from, and you just don't know who is what and how much you're going to have to pay on the spot. They might be making up these numbers as they go. So we pre-book that all for you, and then you don't have to worry about any of that kind of thing. So really great experience, super authentic, and they sing and they have their outfits on, and it's just really great. Another thing that is quite interesting that some kids, tweens, teenagers, even adults, kids at heart would be interested in is rowing like a Venetian. So as I mentioned, the gondolas, they are basically rowed with these big long oars. And so this is basically a lesson on how to row like a Venetian. So you're going to get to learn how to row like a authentic gondolier. So not for everyone, but an interesting experience, and it could absolutely make or break a trip for someone who really wants to do that. So I definitely wanted to mention that. And I mentioned Verona before as a stop on your way to Venice, but you can also do it as a day trip. So as I mentioned, there's Romeo and Juliet's balcony there. There's also Juliet's tomb. And it's just a really nice city as well, depending on your time frame. If you have the time or your interest, it is another great spot to hit. Specifically about arriving to Venice, I did want to mention that it can be a little bit chaotic. As you can imagine, there's water taxis. Which water taxi is mine? I don't know. So we always have an English-speaking assistant meet you, whether that is at the airport, whether that is on literally the train platform, sign with your name on it, and then they escort you to the water taxi, so you're not trying to figure out what's going on. And then also, if you're driving there at the Piazza alla Roma car terminal, there is an English-speaking assistant that will meet the driver and help you coordinate with the water taxi, because they're coming and going all the time. It makes it so seamless, and you don't have to think about those things when you're trying to enjoy your vacation. So that is something that we always include with a Kensington trip. And so I definitely wanted to make note of that. Some notable hotels in Venice is even more difficult. As you can imagine, there's not a lot of new buildings there. So we've got century-old buildings that we're trying to make hotels into. So Often the rooms are a little bit smaller than you would find in other parts of Italy, but that's when we go up in room category so that our clients are comfortable. And then they do have some connecting rooms and some family rooms, depending, but they are even less common than in the rest of Italy. So one that I use very often, again, great relationship, is the Palazzo Sant'Angelo, and they have triple rooms there. I've also sent a family of, I believe it was 8 or 10 to Palazzo Manfredi. Has a fantastic location. It's right in the thick of things, and they have triple rooms there as well. And then there's also the L'Orologio Venezia, which is the sister hotel of the hotel I mentioned in Florence. So it does have that clock theme. They have triple and quadruple rooms there as well. If you're looking for more luxurious hotels, I recommend the Casa Grado. This hotel I visited when I was there in 2018. And it is a 13th century old villa that has been converted into a hotel, and so they still have all of the frescoes. It is right on the Grand Canal, but it is a little bit outside of the St. Mark's Square area, so it is a little bit quieter, but it only takes maybe 10 or 15 minutes to walk into the St. Mark's area. So I particularly like that hotel quite a lot because of its location. It's just a little bit away from the hustle and bustle. But if you are looking for the hustle and bustle, Hotel Denali is one of the top hotels in Venice. I believe some of George Clooney and Amal Clooney's hotel guests from their wedding actually stayed at the Hotel Denali, and it is right close to St. Mark's Square. It has a rooftop terrace, and it is just very, very lovely. So there is that hotel as well. And when I mention these notable hotels, these aren't the only ones available. There are certainly lots to choose from, but these are some of the ones that I wanted to point out that can accommodate families of, more than 2 or 4 people. And so some tips and tricks. This is myself, my travel companion, and one of my local team members in Italy, and then the chef, and we're doing a cooking class in Piemonte, and that was in, I believe, September or October of 2019. And this was at a winery, and so we got a tour of the winery, made our lunch, and had some wine and snacks. We made, I believe, fresh made pasta there, and then we got to go to the rooftop terrace and enjoy the fruits of our labor whilst looking at the landscape. It was very, very lovely. Some tips and tricks that I wanted to mention, just so you have in mind when you're thinking about traveling to Italy. So having Euro cash on hand for small purchases such as gelato, which is ice cream, coffee, souvenir, or trinkets. While credit cards are widely accepted for small purchases like that, a lot of places are either not going to have that because they're just a stall at a market, or they're going to have a minimum charge. So if you're buying coffee for 3 or 4 euros and the minimum charge is 10 euros, you're going to have some cash on hand. So I'm not saying wads of cash, but it's good to have some small change on hand for those kinds of purchases. And appropriate clothing, what I mean by that is specifically with the Vatican, your shoulders and knees have to be covered. So whether that is a scarf around your shoulders, but to be respectful when you are entering into churches and things like that, specifically at the Vatican. They don't allow umbrellas or large bags and things like that. So just to pre-plan for when you are traveling to the Vatican on your tour, that you don't want to pack everything but the kitchen sink to go on that tour. And as I mentioned, there's very little seating inside, so mobility issues, but we can accommodate that. Just realized that there's a yellow mark all over my slide, and I don't know why that is, but we'll carry on. So for large groups, I have in the past, and it depends on your travel preference, of course, but I have pre-planned meals and made reservations. So If you are a group of 6, 8, 10, sometimes at the end of the day, you don't really want to think about, well, what do you want to eat? Well, I don't know. What do I feel like eating? What do you feel like eating? And by the time you decide, you're all very hungry, possibly hangry, and then you finally choose a restaurant and you have to wait. So I have done it where we have had a welcome dinner where it is worked into the cost of the trip already, and the reservation is made. Sometimes we have pre-planned menus. So we can do things like that. I can also do that into your tour. If you have a full day tour and you want to have a stop for lunch, we could do that as well. Or I can just make reservations for your party as well. Also, it depends on, maybe you might want to have a free night from your multi-generational family and not eat dinner together every night. Sometimes you just need a break. So we can also accommodate that as well. When it comes to planning ahead, to avoid disappointment, I suggest planning as early as you can, especially with the future of travel looking like there's going to be limited capacities. Some of the hotels are not going to be booking at 100% capacity. It could be far less than that, 50, 60, 70%. So just because they have those rooms available doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be booking those because of COVID guidelines. So I suggest booking as far as you can in advance so you're not disappointed in the hotel of your choice or things like that. And also when it comes to tickets, they might be limiting those as well. Only a certain amount per day, per hour, that kind of thing. So planning ahead is always the best rule of thumb. And as I mentioned a little bit, tailoring the itinerary to your family dynamic. So what I've suggested here isn't necessarily going to be suitable for everyone in your family. We don't have to do all of it. We don't have to do any of it. We can tailor things to whatever your family is looking for. That's the beauty of a Kensington trip. Customizing is your friend. I have done it for, I believe, they were about 8 or 10, and they had a cousin that lived outside of Venice and they wanted to go and visit for the day. And we worked that into their trip. So on their transfer from Florence to Venice, that's exactly what they did. They stopped for lunch at their family's house, and they had a few hours there. And then it turned out that the driver knew somebody, and so he joined in as well. Obviously, that doesn't happen all the time, but those kinds of things can be worked into your trip. And if you want to have full days, day after day after day, you can absolutely do that. I suggest, and my preference is to have a balance of half-day tours and full-day tours. By the time you're done with 3 full days, you're not retaining that information, and you need a vacation from your vacation. So when I'm planning trips specifically, I do like to balance full-day tours with half-day tours so that you can explore on your own, maybe get some rest, maybe do some shopping, maybe do some more eating, maybe eat gelato every day, that kind of thing. So again, it depends on what your family dynamic is and how much pre-planning you want to do. I have done lunch and dinner reservations every single day for a 12-day itinerary because that's what the clients preferred, to have everything planned in advance. And then I've done no reservations at all. So it really depends, and it's totally up to you. Let's see what else I have for my notes here. That's about it. And that is our journey through Italy right now. We also wanted to mention, for your peace of mind, that we have a risk-free guarantee for our terms and conditions during this, unprecedented time that we're in. So up until April 30th for travel in 2021, without worry, your clients can change their mind for any reason, and they have up till 7 days before departure to do that. We've implemented a new set of standards for travel, specific and stringent precautions that protect your health and safety, as well as our local team and our hotel partners. We've also received the World Travel and Tourism Council's Safe Travel Stamp of Approval, a globally recognized distinction for implementation of health and hygiene protocols aligned with their safe travel protocols. So it's question time. I'm going to pop open my screen again. Let's see here.
Hope, do you want me to read those off to you? Would that be helpful?
Yeah, that would be helpful, actually, if you don't mind.
You did a great job, by the way. I didn't think I could possibly miss travel more, and you made that happen. So
I've been having conversations the past week and just getting so excited that those conversations have been like an hour long and off on tangents, you know, talking about Stanley Tucci and really excited about travel because we've been talking a lot about canceling and moving, that it is such a breath of fresh air to be able to talk about my passions again.
Well, you did a great job, and I think that we were successful at whetting everyone's palate, including my own. If you have more questions on navigating things, certainly we're going to refer you back to Gurvinder. She has all of this information, the safety protocols, the book with confidence. She can provide more information on all of that to you. Hope, we got some great questions. The first is going back to the beginning of the presentation. How long is the biking part of the Catacombs tour?
So it's not a very long portion. You are driven out to the outskirts of the city. You bike along the cycling path to the catacombs, go into the catacombs, come out and bike along that path, and then you're picked up by the vehicle to go back to the city center. And the whole thing, the whole tour as a whole, is about 4 or 5 hours. So it's not grueling. It's not miles and miles. But you do get a snack along the way. So if you are working up a little bit of a sweat, you can obviously take a rest.
And so that was a question too. You kind of touched on it, but anything to add? Someone's asking, how rigorous is the ride?
It's all cycling tours, cycling paths, sorry. So it's all relatively flat. We do have other biking tours in Tuscany, which are upwards of, 30 kilometers, which I think is almost double in miles. And so it's not particularly rigorous, but for anyone under the age of 8, or if you have health issues, I wouldn't recommend it, but that's a case-by-case basis that we can have that conversation about.
Can you talk a little bit about food tastings on the food and walking tours?
Yes. So for the tasting tour, the food walking tour specifically, there are about, I believe, 4 different stops that you go to. If there are dietary restrictions, we love to know that ahead of time so that we can pre-plan and we could make accommodations for that. Vegetarian options, gluten-free options, that kind of thing. And they're traditional. So it's going to be specifically for Rome, dishes that are indigenous to Rome. So not a sit down dinner per se, but sort of grab and go snacks. And you do about 3 or 4 of those. I hope that answered that question.
Absolutely. Someone says, thank you for addressing differences in hotels. And I think it's a great point. And I'm going to give a plug to Gurvinder. I mean, that's really one of the many benefits to working with a travel advisor. That's right there to kind of differentiate those things for you. So if I have a 7-night vacation, can I see all 3 cities without feeling rushed?
Short answer or a long answer? No, I'm just kidding. So yes and no. You're not going to be able to see everything that you want, I presume. So again, it also depends on what days you arrive, because the Vatican is closed on Wednesday mornings and on Sundays. And depending on what day you arrive, you may not be able to see everything that you want to see. You might have to prioritize, okay, I want to do the bucket list items, or I want to do those one-of-a-kind items. it's going to be a little bit rushed, but I wouldn't say run off your feet. The itinerary that we have on our website, I believe, is an 8-day Rome, Florence, Venice, and it hits all of the highlights. So if you take a look at that and think, okay, does this hit everything that I want to see? With that particular itinerary, I do often add in a night because the Colosseum and the Vatican in one day can be so much information that you might not retain it. So if you do have that time, I often add in another day so that you're not traipsing around for 7 hours a day and then you're actually retaining the information. If that's not possible, absolutely, we can do that and you just mentally prepare yourself. But if you do have the luxury of time, I do recommend that. So it didn't really answer the question, but kind of answered the question.
I guess it depends on really the depth that,
Yeah.
someone is looking for in each destination. How
Yeah,
much
if you
time they
want just
have.
the highlights, absolutely, you could do it.
Okay. This is a really great question. Can you talk about the private guides and how long you're with them every day, or can you have days on your own? And you touched on this a little bit, but just
Yeah.
I guess touch on the flexibility of what an
Yeah,
itinerary can be.
absolutely. So our tours work a little bit differently in that to like a small group tour or a large group tour where you're with that same tour guide and that same bus and that same people the whole way through. That's not necessarily how we work. We have guides that specialize in the areas that they are from. So when I was in Amalfi, for example, when I went to Pompeii, I had the top guide who had worked there for 30 years, and he talks about that all day. So if he was in Rome, he wouldn't have the same knowledge that he had when he was in Pompeii. So when we have the tours that are scheduled, you have that guide for the amount of time that that tour is scheduled. So if it's 6 hours, you have the guide for that. And then outside of that is your at leisure time. So whether that's in the evenings, you're having dinner, that kind of time is on your own, or we can schedule in at leisure time if you wanted to have a little bit more free time and you can explore things on your own. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, and I think you touched on that a little earlier too.
Yeah.
And again, if someone's looking for more time, just you would let Gravinder know if you're looking for free time in a particular place. You don't have to always have a guide with you. Yeah.
No, there are certain things that absolutely I would recommend a guide like the Vatican. Try navigating that on your own and you're walking in circles and you're just getting frustrated. But there are like some other things that, sure, if you were savvy enough, you can absolutely do them on your own. But there are certain things that I do recommend a private guide is just makes the experience that much better.
Sure.
Mhm.
In terms of size of group for a family tour, an extended family tour, would 12 work easily, and would 18 be too many?
Again, great question, and there's no simple answer to that. So I would say that 12 is probably going to be the sweet spot. Any more than that, depending on your family, of course, it could be like herding cats. So for lack of a better term, the ones that I have had with multi-generational families have been groups of 12. When you get up to 18, we can have 2 guides, so you can split your group into smaller groups, so you're still getting that experience and that more one-on-one. And like I mentioned with the whispers, depending on your group size, if someone's a little bit farther behind and they can't hear the guide, at least they have that whisper, a little headphone that they can still hear the guide. So there are ways in working around that, but if I'm thinking about my own family, I would ask myself if 18 of them would be good for multiple days. But it's certainly, we can do almost anything. It just depends on the experience that you're looking for and what your budget pertains. But I have done it where I have split groups into groups of 10, for example, where you have 2 guides or things like that. So certainly flexible in terms of that.
Yeah, and early planning. I mean, if you have a larger group, the larger the group
Absolutely.
gets, you want to plan earlier. So if you're
Absolutely.
looking at, yeah.
not only for hotel availability, guide availability, but that's a lot of voices on how they want that trip to look like. So you might think you have one idea and you're ready to go with it, and then someone might say, hey, what about this? Or hey, what about that? So having that longer timeline is helpful for everyone involved.
Gurvinder, we have a few more questions. I don't know if you want to circle back. How are we for time? Are we okay to keep going, or?
Yeah, I think we should.
Okay.
Maybe we've got a few more minutes. Let's go.
Okay.
Go for it. We've got good questions there.
Best time to travel to Italy? That's a great question.
Well, now, because there are no tourists there, if only we could get there. So again, it kind of depends, but the shoulder season can be a little bit more enjoyable for less tourists and weather-wise. So I am from Canada, so I am used to the cold, but I really like the warm, but I also don't want to be in the Vatican with, hundreds of other people in the middle of July at 3 p.m. in the afternoon when the sun is beating down. So when you're getting into May and September, those are my preferred times to travel. Even into April and October, then you're getting less tourists, more enjoyable weather in terms of the heat. Those are my preferences, but I also traveled in the dead of summer, and there's still lots of people around, but yeah, it depends on whether weather or tourists are the better, like which is more important to you. So you have to weigh those options out. Like, yes, less tourists, but if it's going to be cool at night, which is more important to you, and then decide best on that.
Awesome. Do you have tours that would be good for older adults? I like that it's at their own pace because they would need days to rest and do very little.
Absolutely. So like I mentioned with customizing, and that is your absolute friend when it comes to that. I have had older couples travel, and instead of doing a walking tour in Venice, that lady particularly had quite strong mobility issues. We did a boat tour. So she had one of those teak boats that George Clooney arrived to his wedding on, and she toured around Venice like that, as opposed to a walking tour. So in terms of mobility accommodations, we can do our very best to work around those, and then do things at your own pace. If you want to have a whole day to yourself and just, sleep in, enjoy the buffet breakfast, or go at things at your own pace, absolutely, we can fit those in to your itinerary. That's the best part about customizing it.
And we have one more. I think it's a great question. Are there any day trip tours for the vineyards close to Florence for a larger group?
So again, that depends on how large your group is. There are no straight yes or no answers with me, apparently. So absolutely, I have done vineyard tours with larger groups myself, and I've done them with just a couple of other people. So there are lots of vineyards to choose from, and our local team and myself pick vineyards that work for the group that you have. Whether you want to have your whole group with have the vineyard all to yourself, we can work with those parameters. Honestly, it really depends on what you're looking for. I know I've said that 1,000 times already, but it really truly is. We do our best to accommodate in all aspects of that, and also making recommendations based on my experiences and experiences of my clients and the feedback. Like, well, maybe you don't want to go there. Maybe you might want to think about this. And so that's where my expertise comes in, and I work with Gurvinder to make those things possible for you.
Excellent. That's it, Gurvinder. I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Wow, that was wonderful. And as Stephanie said, I'm ready to go too. And I think others are as well. What a great presentation. I really want to thank you. It was absolutely detailed. Love the personalization that you shared with us. Just fabulous. So thank you again to Stephanie and Hope for joining us this evening as we traveled through Italy. Also, thank you to the attendees for your support in sharing your evening with us. I'm available for follow-up questions. Mark your calendars for Gervy Travel's next webinars in April. They are posted on my website. We're going to the south of France with Kensington Tours in April, as well as Antigua and Barbuda in the Caribbean for some fun in the sun. So please visit my website for more information. This webinar is being recorded, so it will be up and accessible on my website next week. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you so much, everybody.
Bye. Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Take
Bye,
care.
thanks everyone.